You're fired. Go.
Mr. Boyne!
Get out of here, Meager. I don't want to see you in this building anymore. Get the hell out of here!
There is a group of people that has changed a person and altered his electric field. So Walter imprints a bunch of pigeons with that electromagnetic signature, and they try to track him down through that. Pigeons do have a very strong magnetic sense, as many migratory birds and other animals have. And that magnetic sense helps them to find north. It helps them to give a direction, so just a sense of direction, but it might also give them a sense of position, where they are, to identify specific magnetic fields. We don't know that for sure, but there are indications for that. And so that could be a starting point to then train them to recognize particular fields and use them in some way.
Given the strength of Mr. Meager's electromagnetic signature, plus his proximity to the tape, I have little doubt that that cassette has been imprinted with Meager's electrical signature.
It's kind of like when a film camera double exposes a picture.
So if you were to ask me, is it possible to imprint a person, there are two questions I would want to ask. One of them is, how strong would the magnetic field of that person be? And then, does that magnetic field look at all like anything that an animal would expect? And so Walter is addressing that first question. So they say we've somehow amplified the magnetic field of that person. And on the other end, it is remarkable to see how weak magnetic fields can be detected by animals, by migratory birds, by pigeons, other birds. So we need to realize that they have quite remarkable capabilities. So one thing that I can tell you is it will boil down to numbers. Is the magnetic field created by that person anywhere close to the magnetic fields that birds can detect? But it is certainly clear that the magnetic fields birds can detect are remarkably weak. So there is something that would help us in that regard.
Pigeons contain traces of magnetite in their beaks, like hundreds of tiny compass needles. The Tesla coils will create an artificial electromagnetic field, which I have already matched with Mr. Whatever's unique signature, and will now imprint onto the pigeon.
Walter mentions one of the ideas of how the magnetic compass could work. He talks about iron crystals in the beak, and indeed, there is an idea that birds may have something like a compass needle, really, that is working and that's moving around and that is tracked in some way. And so that idea is quite intuitive and very promising. The second idea of how the magnetic field could be perceived is that it is actually an indirect effect on light sensing, so they might actually see the magnetic field if you want.
I've worked on a project where I've seen this before. The government had asked me if it was possible to make a human being trackable by pigeons.
Like homing pigeons?
What possible use could that serve?
And I'm sure it had something to do with the commies. It always did back then.
You can train pigeons not very well. It's sort of like a 60-40 instead of 50-50 decision. So it's not a particularly good training, but it's possible. And so you could, build on that. And if you maybe train them many generations, you may be able to do this and imprint them in some way.
Come on, come on.
I guess there's something magic about the magnetic sense. And so what has been done in this particular episode is to take an idea that is actually not far off of what we might want to do in science. But I think that process of developing the ideas, that's a very important part of science. The more boring part and the harder part is actually that you have to test it out and you have to figure out how to realize it. It's often many years of work that you have to put in. And at the end, you then realize, well, it doesn't work, or it works in a slightly different way. And usually nature tells you something in the process and you learn more about the next step. And that's how we progress in science.